Political crises, economic chaos, racism on the rise. Can the UK survive Brexit? I'll ask the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. I'm Mehdi Hassan. Also on the show, Brazil's suspended President Dilma Rousseff says she's the victim of a coup. I'll ask former Brazilian President Fernando Cardoso why he supports impeaching her. But first, did the UK open Pandora's box by voting for Brexit? Trillions of dollars were wiped from global markets, the pound is at a 30-year low, and with racist attacks on the rise, London's mayor, the first Muslim mayor of a Western capital city, has called on police to be extra vigilant. But who's to blame for the growing hate and intolerance? This week's headliner, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan, thanks for joining me on UpFront. We've seen all sorts of reports about stock market crashes, currency crises, impending recession. The former Labour Finance Minister Alistair Darling said this week that he's more scared now than he was during the financial crash in 2008. Has the economic fallout from the Brexit vote been even worse than you would imagined, and how bad will it get?
Can I just say this, that we have always been a city that is open-minded, that is outward-looking, that is a global city, and clearly I'm disappointed that the British public voted to leave the European Union. What's clear to me now is that we need to have access to a single market of 500 million customers, one set of rules, and what's important is when it comes to the renegotiation with the EU, that the next Prime Minister, the next government ensures we have access to a single market. And I've been speaking to employers and businesses non-stop since Friday, reassuring them, reassuring investors that we're not going to stop being open-minded and outward-looking. We're not going to stop having creative people, innovative people, intelligent people here in London. But you're right, there is a challenge for us as a city, and now that we're going to be outside the European Union.
You want London and you want the UK to be part of the single market. The single market, of course, requires freedom of movement. The President of the European Council this week said it's a core principle. You can't have a single market a la carte. Do you agree with that view, that there's going to be free movement as part of single market membership?
I think one of the things you've got to recognise, if you look at those countries outside of the EU that have got access to the single market, think of Norway, think of Switzerland. One of the quid pro quos is access, free movement if you want to have access to the single market. And so the job of the next Prime Minister is to firstly make sure it's clear that we want to have access to a single market, then negotiate the terms. But you're right, the presidents are, that to have access to a single market, you need to give free movement of people across Europe. And the deal that the next Prime Minister's got to do is to square the circle, because the Leave campaign gave the impression you can have your cake and eat it. You can have access to the single market and not have free movement. That's the job they're going to have to do. That's one of the reasons why David Cameron quit.
Why did 52% of Britons, why did a majority of your fellow Britons vote to leave the EU? Why did they ignore the warnings from all the economists and experts about catastrophe, etc.? Why do you think they won?
There's a number of explanations. My explanation is the frustrations, the anxieties that people have. They can't get access to a decent school. They're waiting too long to see a GP or a specialist to be treated in the NHS. They can't get homes for their sons and daughters or nephews and nieces. All the grievances people may have had, the blame was put on the European Union. The blame was put on immigration. The blame was put on the other. And I'm afraid during the campaign, a number of the promises made by the Leave team were ones that the public believed. I'm not blaming the public. And the challenge for the Leave campaign team is now to square that circle.
On the Leave campaign team, are they responsible? Is the rhetoric deployed by the Leave campaign responsible for this rather shocking rise that we've seen in racist, xenophobic attacks towards East Europeans, Muslims, ethnic minorities since the referendum result? You've called for the police to be extra vigilant about this rise in racism, but what's behind it? Is it people like Boris Johnson, your predecessor, scaremongering about Turkish migrants and foreign terrorists during the campaign?
I mean, just to reassure viewers of yours from outside the UK, this is a great country. This is the best country in the world as far as I'm concerned. I would say that I'm British. London is the greatest city in the world. We don't simply tolerate difference. We respect it, we embrace it, we celebrate it. You can't escape the fact that the campaign was horrible. There was a poster used by the Leave team, a poster of refugees fleeing Syria in fear of their lives, and the words, breaking point. The tactics of fear was used during the Leave campaign, saying Turkey is going to join the EU, giving the impression that there'd be 79 million Turkish people coming to our country. And that's created an atmosphere, I believe, which legitimises, which says it's okay, it normalises behaviour that previously we wouldn't normalise. Name calling, criminal damage, graffiti being daubed.
So given you've
racist,
drawn that line,
abuse.
given you've drawn that direct line, should the likes of Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, the Justice Minister, Nigel Farage, the leader of UKIP, these leaders of the Leave campaign, should they now apologise and do more to rein in some of this sentiment?
I said during the campaign, during the great debate that was had the couple of days before the voting, I called them out for this. I said, look, it's okay Boris Johnson on the one hand saying how wonderful immigration is, but he can't then on the other hand be responsible for some of the language used, some of the posters used, some of the tactics used. And I'm afraid those responsible for orchestrating that campaign need to now explain this rise in racial violence, this rise in racial abuse, this rise in racial tension. My job as the mayor is to make sure I keep our city safe. My job as the mayor is to make sure we have zero tolerance towards these incidents. My job as the mayor is to say to minority communities, including Europeans, you are welcome here. I value the contribution you make to our city, the work you do, the taxes you pay. That shouldn't change.
Your election as Mayor of London in May grabbed global headlines. London got a lot of praise around the world for being the first Western capital city to elect a Muslim mayor. The UK was seen as enlightened, tolerant, at ease with diversity. Do you think that's now all been undone by the Brexit vote and the growing nationalism, jingoism and anti-immigrant sentiment we've seen since the referendum result?
No, London is the greatest city in the world. It really is. Where else in the world can you get somebody from humble background, council estate, not simply an ethnic minority, but a religious minority, and not just any old religion, it's the religion of Islam, and we know the current challenges the followers of Islam, us Muslims, have. But also I've been touched by the asylum seekers in London, the refugees, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Muslims, who've been moved by our campaign and us winning. And I'm hoping everyone now recognises that the London promise, you work hard, you get a helping hand, you can achieve anything, is one that will go forward to the next generation as well.
A lot of people, both Muslim and non-Muslim, Sadiq Khan, are saying you're now a role model to young Muslims both at home and abroad. Do you feel a lot of pressure when people say that?
I didn't ask to be a role model. I don't hold myself out as a Muslim leader or a Muslim spokesperson. I'm a mayor who happens to be a Muslim. I recognise, though, that I am a role model. I say that with humility, not with arrogance. And that brings with it a responsibility, which I take very, very seriously. I hope I never let down those who hold me up as a role model. I will do my best. That's all I can promise to do.
You are a liberal Muslim. You voted in favour of gay marriage. You've campaigned to keep pubs open in your constituency. Obviously, a lot of Muslims in the UK, more conservative Muslims, don't share those views. They didn't, for example, turn up at the gay pride parade that you spoke at earlier this week. Is there a danger that a lot of non-Muslims now decide that you, as a liberal Muslim, are the only benchmark of what a good Muslim is, a moderate is?
It's really important that we say loudly and clearly we're not one homogenous group. I don't speak for the Islamic faith, either in the country or the city, even for my own family. I speak for myself. And what I try to do as a politician is to be representative of everyone. The phrase we used during the campaign was, I'm going to be a mayor for all Londoners. I meant what I said, I'll be a mayor for all Londoners. That means Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, those not a member of an organised faith. That means black, white, lesbian, gay, rich, poor, old, young. That's the mandate that I've got, and I take it very, very seriously. What we shouldn't do is pigeonhole people according to what one individual does. I would never do that, and nor should others.
When you as a Muslim see members of the public, your fellow Britons, on live TV, proudly saying that they voted to leave the European Union in order to keep Muslims out, how does that make you feel? What's your reaction to that?
It's heartbreaking. I mean, what I say loud and clear is there must be no place for that in a civilised society. We would have zero tolerance for that. What we need to recognise, though, is it's possible to have what I call multiple identities. You can be British, a European, a Londoner, of Asian origin, of Islamic faith, all these things, a husband, a father, they're not mutually exclusive. And what's important is that we recognise in the 21st century, one of the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities we're going to have is identity. Who are we? That sense of belonging. And what's important is that I reassure people, those who may not meet Muslims, Mehdi, the only knowledge they've got of Islam is what they see in the newspapers or the media. When criminals, when terrorists do bad things, but use the name of Islam to justify their actions, the impression these people may have, because they don't work with Muslims, they don't know Muslims, is that those minority of people speak for Islam. And one of the jobs that I do, because of the position I'm in, is to reassure people that, you know, those minority of people don't speak for the faith of Islam.
How do you beat that Islamophobia that's so prevalent in the press and the media, as you just mentioned? How do you beat that when it seems to be everywhere in the press, in mayoral campaigns, in EU referendum campaigns? How do you stop it?
You do it one person at a time, one newspaper at a time, one media outlet at a time. But Martin Luther King once said, look, we can legislate to change the way people act, but not the way people think. But over a period of time, by changing the way people act, it will change the way people think. Look, my dad and mum, when they first came to London in the 1960s, there were signs up, and you know this from your parents. The sign said what? No blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And by no blacks, they meant anybody that wasn't white. In their lifetime, they saw their children being the victims, me, my brothers and my sister, of racial abuse, getting involved in fights. My daughters, 16 and 14, who live in the same area, have, thank God, never suffered overt racial abuse. My parents' son, my father's passed away, is now the Mayor of London. That's the progress we've made, and I'm an optimist. And so, we've got to make sure we never stand still. If you stand still and are complacent, that leads to problems. We've got to always fight this battle, and I will fight that battle, as will a lot of decent-minded people who aren't ethnic minorities. They're white.
Sadiq Khan, thanks for joining me on UpFront.
It's a pleasure.
Day in, day out, politicians and pundits tell us what we should really be afraid of. But what if there's something out there that's bigger than all of those threats? Something deadlier than, say, terrorism? A threat which could result in something as small as a paper cut killing you? Because that's what the world was like before antibiotics, and we could be heading into a world now where antibiotics don't work anymore. The consequences of that could be catastrophic. Listen to the UK's Prime Minister speaking here to the BBC.
We are in danger of going back to the dark ages of medicine.
Wow, the dark ages. But he's a politician, not a doctor.
We are in the post-antibiotic era.
Yeah, that's the head of the World Health Organization, sounding the alarm bell. A recent study found that globally, in 2014 alone, 700,000 people died of drug-resistant infections. By 2050, it said drug-resistant superbugs could kill 10 million people a year. That's more than cancer kills now. So whose fault is all this? Well, the greedy drug companies, reckless doctors, and you. Well, us. Because antibiotics, as medical experts point out, are miracle drugs that should be used sparingly. You overuse them and they don't work. And yet between 2000 and 2010, global antibiotic use skyrocketed by almost 40%. In the UK, 97% of patients who asked their doctor for an antibiotic got one. Look, we can't say we weren't warned. Sir Alexander Fleming, pioneer of the first true antibiotic, penicillin, called it almost a century ago. The thoughtless person playing with penicillin treatment is morally responsible for the death of the man who succumbs to infection with the penicillin-resistant organism. And yet here we are today, running off to our doctors, demanding antibiotics for even the mildest of sore throats. FYI, antibiotics don't work for most sore throats. To borrow a line from the top British economist Jim O'Neill, who led the UK research into global antimicrobial resistance, unless we stop doling out antibiotics like sweets, we're going to kick off an antibiotic apocalypse, killing millions. Is that scary enough for you? The biggest, richest country in Latin America, Brazil, is in the midst of a massive political and economic crisis. President Dilma Rousseff is suspended and on the verge of being impeached, though her supporters say she's the victim of a right-wing coup. Joining me now from Sao Paulo is former Brazilian President Fernando Cardoso, who supports Dilma's impeachment. Thanks for joining me on UpFront. Fernando Cardoso, suspended President Dilma Rousseff says she is the victim of a legal and political farce. She says when an elected president is suspended because of a crime she hasn't committed, the name we give is not impeachment, but a coup. Why is she wrong?
Well, first of all, because she incurred in some, mistakes, aggressing the Constitution, in fiscal questions, in using money without congressional authorization, etc. So this is not a crime in the sense of the penal code. It's a crime against the Constitution. It's a political crime. It's the lack of responsibility.
You say political crime. That's why impeachment proceedings were opened against her. One of the main charges is that she allegedly manipulated Brazil's budget in violation of the law of the Constitution, so-called fiscal peddling. But you did that too when you were president, didn't you? Back in 2001, 2002, you're accused of peddling around $300 million a year in terms of today's currency exchange rates.
Well, in my case, first of all, the new law was during my government, in 2001, so-called fiscal law. So we are adjusting ourselves to the new law. So we postponed some payments by $2 or $3 million of dollars. But now we are not referring to 2 millions. We're referring to 14, 16, 20 billion dollars. It's quite different.
Fernando Cardoso, the rest of the world is looking at Brazilian politics and wondering, is it riddled with hypocrisy? Acting President Michel Temer is not only banned from running for president for 8 years for violating campaign finance rules, but Brazil's Supreme Court is also considering a motion of impeachment against him as well. The former Speaker of the House, who led the impeachment campaign against Dilma, has been accused by the Attorney General of taking millions of dollars in bribes. His successor, the current Speaker of the House, is accused of taking bribes. The current leader of the Senate is also accused of taking bribes. Do any of these people have any credibility when it comes to impeaching Dilma?
Well, you mentioned three important political Brazilian leaders
4 people.
who belong, 4 people maybe, who belong to the Democratic Party in Brazil. Democratic Party was one of the supporters of Lula and Dilma. So the reason why they moved against her is different from what is my reason why I'm supporting now the impeachment. Because the Brazilian people, they massively protest against the government.
But you don't see any irony that the former Speaker of the House, the man who led the impeachment campaign, is then removed under corruption accusations. You don't see the irony?
They were not the leaders of the campaign for the impeachment. The campaign for the impeachment came from people, for the masses on the streets, not in Congress. The Congress maybe opportunistically move it toward the same position.
Okay, so you accept opportunistically. Just on acting President Temer, I know you support, as you say, impeaching Dilma. Do you support impeaching Temer too? Because according to a recent opinion poll, 58% of Brazilians are in favor of impeaching the acting president. That's not very far off the 61% who back impeaching Dilma. So if you want to listen to the people, you need to support impeachment of both.
This is a misleading information. 60% or more of Brazil are not supporting, are not voting in favor of either Dilma or Temer. They are not asking for Temer to be impeached.
58% of Brazilians, Fernando Cardoso, say they want to see Mr. Temer impeached, according to a poll published by Data Folha in April.
Well, that's not to my knowledge. But anyhow,
well, I'm telling you now, there's 58% of Brazilians, according to a poll in your country. So do you support the impeachment of the acting president? Because you say you listen to the people.
Listen to me. Let's explain to you first. You have to have more information.
Well, you're the one who doesn't have any information of the polls, with respect. I'm telling you information.
Okay, my party is moving a process against Dilma and Temer by accusing both of them to have manipulated elections by using money coming from not clear sources. So that's my position.
So do you support the impeachment of the acting president? Yes or no?
This is not impeachment. It's a different process.
I accept that. I'm asking you a question though. Do you support the impeachment of Mr. Temer? Yes or no?
What is the reason? What is the reason? The constitutional reason for that? Impeachment depends on the Constitution and on the lack of basis, political basis inside Congress. That is not the case with President Temer.
Just to broaden it out, this whole anti-Dilma movement came out of the wider multi-billion-dollar corruption scandal involving Brazil's state-run oil firm Petrobras, the biggest ever corruption scandal in Brazil's history, perhaps in the history of any modern democracy. But it's a scandal which has affected not only Dilma's government and ruling Workers' Party, it's also been linked to acting President Michel Temer, to the former Speaker of Parliament who started the impeachment motion, and to your PSDB government too. When you were president in 2002, your government is alleged to have received a $100 million bribe during Petrobras' purchase of an Argentine company.
No, sorry. I protest. This is not true.
You deny what these
this
two
is a political
former,
accusation.
So you deny what these two former Petrobras directors, Nestor Severo and Senator de Amaral, have revealed in their plea bargains. They say that there are documents showing...
No. They never show any document. Only Severo said that during the process of buying this refinery, someone vaguely received, imagine you, $100 million.
Did somebody in your government receive $100 million or not from Petrobras?
No, this is not true in a protest, because you cannot say that without giving data, number, person, so on and so forth. This is not true.
You can't blame Dilma and her supporters for calling this a coup now that we have a secret phone recording that was released in May in which the then planning minister, Homero Juca, I believe his name, basically plots to remove Dilma and install Temer in an attempt to shut down the Petrobras scandal investigation in which he and other officials have been implicated. He's since resigned, of course, but he's on the phone saying this is why we should install Temer and get rid of Dilma, because of Petrobras.
The scandal in Petrobras is completely, entirely in the hands of people close to Lula's and Dilma's government. And this is very serious.
No one is questioning the seriousness. I'm asking you a specific question about this minister. When he's on the phone saying to someone else, we have to change the government to be able to stop the bleeding, and the other senator says the easiest solution would be to put in Michel. When we hear that, what else can we call it but a coup?
Sorry, but what was the result of that? Zero. The process is, the trial is proceeding. The justice is independent, and they are continuing to do what has to be done.
Okay, Fernando Cardoso, there have also been some pretty serious accusations against you personally on the corruption front. In February of this year, Brazil's Ministry of Justice opened an inquiry to investigate claims that you used the company Brazif to make monthly payments to a woman who is allegedly your former mistress. What's your response to those accusations?
First of all, her denied the fact. Second, the business company said that's not true. Third, she started to work with that business people in the year 2013, when I was no more president. And I had what has been, if this is an accusation, we have a love affair, was 20 years before. So this is political misinterpretation.
She says you arranged $3,000 monthly payments through the firm, and the Ministry of Justice are investigating.
No. She refused that. She said it's not true. She came to Brazil, and on the TV, she denied the fact, and this is simply not so.
So then why are the Ministry of Justice and the police investigating it then? Why are they investigating it?
You know why? Because people very close to PMDB put this in the social media. And I like the Dilma Minister of Justice, and he was forced to open a discussion. I asked the people about it. You gave me one concrete element. So this is not true. This is political attempt to demoralize a person who has correct life. Let me say no. Let's go one step ahead. This lady has a son. She said the son is mine. DNA proved it is not mine. And in spite of that, I like this guy. And I support his education all the time with my money, using the central bank and all that to send money to this guy.
But why do you send money to this guy if he's not your son? Maybe that's why people are suspicious.
No. Because I had a connection with him. I like him.
One last question before we finish. Do you worry that the entire Olympics in Brazil will be overshadowed this summer by these ongoing political crises in your country? That your country's standing in the world will be harmed at a time when everyone in the world is looking at Brazil?
Well, that's a pity. I don't know why, it's a real pity, the fact that the government of Brazil has been so undermined by corruption and by bad political decisions. It coincided with the Olympics. I would prefer to have a much more sound nation to show to the world. But unfortunately, in the last years, the corruption in PT government was so high and the lack of sense of reality so elevated that we are now facing a disastrous situation.
Fernando Cardoso, thank you so much for joining me on UpFront.
Thank you.
That's our show. UpFront will be back next week.